Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Smolenski, and I'm here with Nick Hertz. And Nick is here to talk a little bit about the findings from the Q3 system usability scale analysis. So we're both on the research team. Every quarter, Nick looks at this, and he's here to share the results. So Nick, the burning question that we all have, what's the score from the past quarter?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the score for this quarter was a 67.5. It had a margin of error of plus or minus 0.9 at the 95% confidence interval. And this is coming from about 940 responses from SaaS users in particular. So this is a slight decrease from last quarter, but it's kind of within that margin of error. So it's not a statistically significant drop, but it is just kind of an incremental drop visually. We're right in that okay adjective space. So kind of in line with some of the other, comparative companies in the industry. So it's not a bad score.
Okay, well, thanks for letting us know that. That's a little unfortunate. I'll ask why a little bit later. But before we dive into that, was there anything interesting looking at the different cohorts? Because I know that you look at that too.
Yeah, absolutely. So the big thing was, again, similar to the overall score, we saw a reduction in every cohort as well. Again, still within that margin of error, but still an incremental decrease. The one that is kind of I want to draw more attention to, and this is pretty consistent from quarter to quarter as well, but new users are kind of consistently our lowest sus cohort by a pretty significant margin. And we see significant differences between new and experienced users and new and free users, with new users being significantly lower. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. I think that'll kind of play into the themes. Again, a little spoilers around complexity. New users struggle to kind of learn and understand how to use GitLab, and I think that's reflected here in that sus score.
Got it. So my last question before I ask more about themes, I know that sus is made up of 10 questions, which allows you to really dissect that score and look for things that maybe we're doing really well at, maybe things we're doing not so great at all. I was wondering if anything stands out at the per question level.
Yeah. So on that per question basis, again, I'll go in a little bit more detail around some of the more negative ones, but as you can kind of see, there's some questions around complexity, ease of use, and learnability that are on the lower side, which is that kind of leads into some of the conversation we'll have about themes and that sort of thing. And then on the positive side, we do have, again, this nice question number one, I think that I'd like to use GitLab frequently. That's consistently been above our target. Let me see if I can quickly get to it. So that's a really nice thing to see as well. That's a positive sign, is that it's above our target, and it's the only question to kind of remain at that level. So people are enjoying using GitLab, but there are also other people that have some constructive feedback for us to improve GitLab.
Awesome. Okay. And let's get to the why here. So I know that there's lots of verbatim that comes in with this particular survey related to the why behind the score a little bit. So I was wondering, what are the major themes from this quarter that you found?
Absolutely. So kind of going back to what I was alluding to in your previous question, there's a couple of things that pop out to us from the scores, and that's, again, around complexity, ease of use, GitLab being cumbersome to use, and that's kind of reflected as well in the verbatim. So one is kind of complexity. GitLab is tough to use, especially to newcomers. You can kind of see in these, score breakdowns, new users are having the highest drops, and they're having, the lowest scores in general. So it's complicated to use, and that's reflected in the verbatims as well. So some of that complexity It comes from feature richness. There's a lot on the screen. There's a lot of features they can use. They don't know where to find them always. And then there's kind of a theme around a perception that GitLab is for technical users, and that's who really succeed in using it. And then if you're not a technical user or new to kind of Git or the kind of this technology space, you're going to struggle. And so that's kind of a perception we've seen a couple of times. And that kind of leads to another theme, which we've seen kind of consistently from quarter to quarter, is learnability as well. And in just that, there's a perception that they need to know a lot of things to get going in GitLab, and that you kind of have to learn a lot to do much of anything. And then once again, supported pretty well in the verbatims. Again, more than 20 people mentioned a steep learning curve or requesting tools to make GitLab easier to learn. So that's kind of, I see the themes as all interrelated around complexity, navigation, discoverability, and learnability. And then that all relates back to our new users struggling and to kind of get going in GitLab.
That's well said. And the quote that I'm looking at right there, it's difficult to get non-technical people spun up, and I constantly have to train them. That's something that I have personally run into with some past participants who have shared that very same statement. So related to that a little bit, you've been doing this for several quarters now. How do the things here compare to past quarters?
Yeah, so as I mentioned kind of at the beginning, we are seeing that incremental decrease in overall score, but the interesting thing is from quarter to quarter, it's not significantly different. And we see that once again for this quarter. It's like the overall score is not significantly different than last quarter, but it is a visual decrease. And we kind of seeing that, although I do, there may be some stabilization happening over the last couple quarters, which is really good to see. And that kind of holds true for the per question basis too, is that some incremental decrease, but for the most part, no change really from at least from last quarter to today.
Got it. Okay. So if my math is correct with the calendar, this would have been a quarter when we would have measured self-managed. Was wondering, how come we don't see that here?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So we actually did start collecting, we collected a good amount of self-managed data, but for a number of reasons, we ran into some difficulties with reliably sampling self-managed users. So I won't kind of go into the details now, but the data we produced was unreliable and didn't produce an accurate score. So we didn't want to, one, post something that we couldn't replicate in future quarters, right? The sampling methodology, and also we didn't want to post an unreliable and inaccurate sus score for self-managed users. That being said, we are actively looking into more reliable or stable sampling strategies to make sure we can get that accurate and reliable self-managed data in the quarters to come.
Okay, sounds like that was a good call to make. So I guess lastly, any final thoughts or next steps?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot that we're doing now. So at the department level, we have a couple KRs around increasing sus. This is kind of a consistent thing from quarter to quarter. We always try to tackle an aspect of sus. And then we have some sub department KRs around improving how we administer sus and basically getting the data out to the teams to make it more actionable. So some of that's around building a database for sus verbatims. Part of that's adding some machine learning around sentiment analysis for those sus verbatim, and then establishing a delivery process for those findings to the stages of interest. So really getting those actionable insights to the teams that need them. And so we can kind of see if we can move those sus scores by improving the product.
I like that idea of servicing those up because they can get lost in the cracks. Yeah. So great. Well, Nick, thank you so much for your hard work here, and really appreciate all the effort.
Yeah, thank you.